Hey, this is Scott Alda Coffey. I'm here with the Outpost, promoting it for a July 2nd release in theaters and a July 3rd release on VOD. It's an amazing movie based on the Jake Tapper book, The Outpost, an untold story of American valor. It's a patriotic, action-filled, suspenseful, it's nonpartisan, human story, all about everyday American heroes. And I'm here with Elias at the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to the party, pal!
You're my boy, Blue!
Yo, Adrian!
A podcast with interviews of amazing guests from the world of pop culture.
Oh, yeah!
TV.
Nice!
Movies.
Oh, I love the movies!
Comedy and more. From deep inside the Man Cave, your host, Elias.
Scott, welcome to the cave.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
How are you? What's new with you?
I'm good. You know, I'm hanging in there, still pretty much quarantined in my apartment, trying to continue to be safe.
Yeah. How's that treating you? What have you been doing with that?
It's been fine. I've been, it's allowed me to catch up on a lot of television. I've been reading a lot. On top of, I've also started a movie club with a friend from college, so watched a lot of movies I haven't had a chance to see yet. So that's been good.
There you go. So, man, you've been busy for a few years now, projects and movies, TV, and we'll talk about that. But I want the listeners to get a little more about you. Where are you originally from?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and I grew up in the suburb, a town called Winchester. So I never got into the city a whole lot, but I was, I grew up in that area.
What was the last thing you said?
I grew up in that area. I didn't go into the city a whole lot, but I was in that general area.
Yeah. How come you didn't go to the city a lot?
I just never really had much of a chance to go in. When I was younger, my parents would take me in every now and then, but I just I lived in a pretty big town, so there was always things to do kind of around me, and I lived next to a smaller city, Woburn, so there was still a lot to do in my area, and I never had much opportunity to go into the city.
Yeah.
But every time I did, I obviously loved it and had a blast.
I'm
And
surprised.
every now and then I'd meet friends in there.
I'm surprised because Winchester's, like you said, it's 8 miles away from Boston. I'm surprised you
I
and
know.
your friends didn't say, "Oh, let's go to Boston for a few hours." Or
I know, and honestly, looking back, I kind of wish I went more, just because you're right, it is so close, and it's an easy train ride in. I know, sometimes, since I've left the city, if I'm home visiting, sometimes I'll meet some friends in Boston because it's a pretty neutral area to meet, and I have friends from all over Massachusetts, so sometimes I do that.
yeah. So growing up in Winchester, what were you into as a kid?
I actually grew up doing a lot of theater. There was a kids theater program in my town, which I could start doing going into fourth grade. And I did that program all the way till I graduated eighth grade, because that was about as long as that program went. And they would do 3 shows a year. So I was very, very, very immersed in that. And then, I continued to do theater. I got involved with a local theater company called the Stoneham Theater, which is a neighboring town to Winchester. I got involved with them starting beginning of high school. So I got pretty much into that. So it was a lot of theater, theater.
How old were you when you first realized that this is what you wanted to do?
I think I was around 3 years old, honestly. It's one of those things that I've kind of always felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. My grandfather is actor Alan Alda, and so I grew up in the arts world and in a kind of a very artistic environment, and I think I was exposed to it at a very early age, and I think I was very fascinated by it by a very early age, because I was like, what is this kind of magical thing that people do? You know?
Yeah. Well,
and I think that really got to me.
Yeah. Well, your grandfather's a legend.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, and I grew up watching MASH with my parents.
Video.
So, did you love watching that show?
I did. kind of embarrassing. I don't think I've ever actually watched all of it, like all the way through. I've watched like about like half the series, and I've watched the famous finale. But I've loved MASH. Some of my favorite memories actually when I was little was watching it with him, because he definitely exposed the show to me at a young age, and I remember like thinking that was so cool and just loving every minute of that.
Yeah. So you attended? Where'd you attend college for acting?
Yes, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, which is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
How was it going there?
A lot of hard work. A lot of hard work, especially freshman year. It was. Luckily, I went for my last 2 years of high school. I went to an art high school. It was a private art high school called Walnut Hills. So I kind of was starting the training process, and but at CMU, there was definitely a lot of work. There was a lot of. It took a lot of. There was a lot to learn, but I enjoyed it. It was a good experience. I needed it helped kind of set me on the path that I'm on today.
Yeah. So like when you told your family, like, I mean, I know you started at an early age, like, but when you this is what you told your family, this is what I want to go do, like, you wanted to follow like your grandfather's steps and everything. Like, what was the reaction from your family?
What was really cool is my family, they always kind of wanted me to go on. They always wanted me to choose my own path, whichever path that I wanted to go on. And it just kind of happened that I was really into acting, which is something my family knew well. And they were immediately incredibly supportive of it. But they were also very big on, they're like, okay, we support you pursuing this. But they also were very, they made me understand the realities of the business and how hard it is. My grandfather was very, clear on this. It's not a walk in the park. It's a lot of hard work, which was good to know, because I think that really helped prepare me for when I graduated college and I was really ready to pursue it full time. That like I'm not going to be able to just graduate and start working. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
So that was really good going into that.
Yeah. So when you finished school, what was the next step? What did you do? Did you like pack your bags up and go move out right to LA, or did you go back to Boston?
I mean, it was pretty much, I think I went back to Boston for maybe about a month, just to kind of like breathe after graduation for a second. Then me and my mom came out to LA. We flew out here. I didn't have an apartment yet or anything. We stayed in a hotel for a couple weeks. And I searched for an apartment. I connected with one of my college friends, and we went on an apartment together. And then the rest was history. And I kind of just took it off from there. It was like totally new. Luckily, I had a few family out here. So like one of my mom's cousins was out here, and some family friends. So I had some people to connect with, which was really nice. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't completely alone. Yeah. As well as some friends from college also moved out.
What did you start doing out there when you first got out there?
Well, the one of the first things I did was look for a day job to help pay rent. So I got a job down the street from me that a childhood friend of mine who was also living in LA worked with and helped me get the job at it was like a food restaurant called Kitchen 24, like a cashier place. Then it was kind of to start getting work, to start finding auditions, I also, one of the first things I did, which really, really helped me a lot, was I joined an acting studio just to continue the process and learning, because I had to also remind myself that like the training doesn't end after graduation. It's a continuous process, and that also helped me find a good community of people and really helped me figure out steps to take for my career, which was also really beneficial, because it can be daunting moving out right after college, wide-eyed, trying to figure out, great, now what's next?
So while you're out there and you're working and everything, and you start auditioning
Yeah.
and everything. Like, what was your first gig that you got out there?
Actually, the first thing I did was a horror film. A friend of mine from college who was a directing major. When he graduated, he directed his first feature-length film, and he asked me to be in it. And it was this horror movie called Gorinos. And so I shot that for a couple of weeks. We actually went back to Pittsburgh to shoot it, and that was a lot of fun. It was a fun, campy horror film. I got to work with some people I knew, which was really great, and it was a really good first set experiences. And then after that, I did a couple episodes of shows on the Investigative Discovery Network, where they do a lot of like crime recreation stuff.
Yeah.
That was also, I also got my start in some of those shows as well, which was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And now you got a role coming up in a movie called The Outpost that's coming out in June, right?
July.
July
First
July
weekend of
2nd. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no problem.
so tell us about the project and what drew you in there.
Yeah. So this is a pretty incredible project. It's Afghanistan War is the focus of it, an event that took place in 2009. It's based on a nonfiction book by Jake Tapper, and it's about a tiny unit of U.S. soldiers who are alone on a remote combat outpost in Afghanistan. But this outpost was actually located deep in a valley surrounded by like 3 mountains. And normally the outposts are on top of the mountains because it's easier to attack and from higher up, but this one was at the bottom of the valley. And at one point, they ended up being overwhelmed and attacked by a huge force of Taliban fighters, and ended up being this huge battle and fight for survival. And it ended up being called the Battle of Kamdesh. And it was the bloodiest American engagement of the Afghanistan War. And they also became one of the most decorated troops in the 19-year conflict. But what I remember when I first read the script to this, one of the first things I thought is I couldn't believe I didn't know the story. It's one of the biggest battles in the current war, and a lot of American heroes lost their lives and were injured, and it was just such an important story that I immediately felt like I had to be a part of telling it. So I got on board instantly, basically.
Tell us about your audition when you went in there.
Yeah, so I was a self-tape audition.
Okay.
And I actually, when I had it, I was actually really, really sick, and I had like around 24 hours to get it in. So I met with my acting coach who helped put me on tape, and basically in between takes, I was like just downing tea, just drinking a lot of tea to help, clear my voice and everything. But it ended up working out, and I ended up apparently doing a really great take and getting the part, which is awesome. I was really, really lucky for that.
So tell us about your role and your character.
Yeah, I play Sergeant Michael Scusa. He's a real guy, a soldier there, and he's someone that had wanted to be a soldier his whole life. That was something that he was really passionate about and was really focused on. And he also was such a family man that he during this battle he had a 1-year-old son and a wife back home, and he would talk about them constantly, like they were his whole life. In fact, he would sometimes get teased a lot by the other soldiers because he talked about his son so much. He was just really loving, and from everyone I spoke to, from the soldiers and family members, it was just pretty much universal. They said about just what a nice guy he was. It was almost impossible not to like him, and that was just kind of really cool to be able to play a guy like that. To have that honor is pretty special.
So when you got the role and everything, like how did you prepare for it? Like what kind of research you do? And did you like go and read some books on it and like watch documentaries?
Yes, actually. One of the first things I did was I got the book that the movie's based on, The Outpost, The Untold Story of American Valor, and I devoured that, which was really insightful. I also read another book based about the conflict by Clint Romachet, who is being portrayed by Scott Eastwood in the movie. He wrote a book called Red Platoon, which was a more like in-depth look at the specific battle and the soldiers on the ground. So that was also really valuable. And yes, we actually as a group watched a lot of documentaries about the ongoing conflict in Afghanistan. There was one day we actually, all of us that were based in LA went to the director's house, and he did a screening of this documentary called Restrepo, which is really fascinating, and it follows real soldiers in Afghanistan. And there's a camera crew there in the middle of these battles, and it was really interesting seeing like firsthand accounts of what goes on there, hearing their stories. It was pretty powerful, and some of the other ex-military who were part of the movie were there, and like every now and then they'd pause the movie and like give some insight on like what we're looking at, what kind of equipment they were using, the different trucks and all that stuff to help us with some terminology and give us some better insight. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So like, what do you think was like the biggest challenge that you encountered, like trying to connect with the character?
I think for me, what was the hardest was making sure I was really honoring Michael and his family and all the soldiers that fought, because I think there was this fear that like I wasn't going to do justice for him. So I think it was just really, really important to me to make sure I got this right, and I think that was really important for everyone on board. And that was something I definitely was worried about, but I was doing the work and the research to make sure that the best I could bring him to life and to honor him and to really do justice for him.
So Orlando Bloom's in the movie with Scott Eastwood also. Like, how was it working with those guys?
It was really cool. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of Orlando Bloom films with like Pirates of the Caribbean and Lord of the Rings. I was obsessed with those growing up. And he was a really, really nice guy. After the read through the first day, he came up to everyone, introduced himself. He was very easy to talk to and work with. I didn't have a lot of scenes with him. There were a couple of scenes where with him, but they were mainly group sequences. But he was really, really nice. And Scott Eastwood the same. I had more scenes with Scott. What I really, really admired about Scott Eastwood was that he made an effort every morning when he got on set to shake every single person's hand and say hi.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was really encouraging and just really nice. It just showed what a good guy he is. And and it didn't matter who they were. He wanted to make sure he connected with everyone. And I thought that was really sweet, really, really nice to see.
Yeah. Where was the movie filmed, and how long did it take you guys to finish it?
We filmed it in Bulgaria, actually, and it took about 2 months.
Okay.
We did, just before we started shooting, we actually did 8 days of basic training to become as much of soldiers as we could and really learn as much as we could to really look like we knew what we were doing. And then we shot for 2 months. I was there for about 6 weeks of the 2 month shoot.
Oh, wow. How was basic training?
Hard, really hard. It was at the time it was so grueling, and like it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But then afterwards, looking back, it was like, what I learned there is like going to carry me for the rest of my life. And I'll never forget it. That's something I'll be like telling my grandkids about, because it was really invaluable. And then also it really, really, really helped once we started shooting the film, because I didn't think I understood how to use the gun during all the basic training, but then the minute I got on set and we really put it into practice, I'm like, oh wow, I'm able to incorporate everything I learned, and it was really valuable. It was really cool.
Now you mentioned that you did a self tape for the movie. Like, so like for your career, like what do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy the self tape or auditioning in front of people?
It's interesting. I think both have pros and cons. Like I like for a self tape that like if I mess up, I can just do it again. But at the same time, by doing that, you know, and I feel like as actors, most of us have a perfectionist quality to us that it's hard to like do it too many times because it's not, you want to get it right. And one thing I really like about going in person is that you can have that personal connection with the casting director. There's someone to talk to. And also what's beneficial is sometimes you walk into a room and if you have questions about something, you can ask them, or they may be like, for this, actually, can you try it this way? They can give you notes and direct you, which you don't necessarily get with a self tape. So I think overall, I'd probably prefer in person, but during quarantine, there's definitely been more self tapes. No, we're not really doing in person at the moment.
Good. So you've been acting for a few years now, right? Like other than your grandfather, like who are like some influences in your acting in the acting world that you look up to?
Oh boy.
Or would you say your grandfather's number one?
I mean, he's definitely always been number one. He's someone I've always emulated, and you know, it's my dream to like even be able to work with him someday. But if I weren't gonna say my grandfather, some people I really looked up with. As far as like the newer generation goes, I've really been admiring Adam Driver's career and him as an actor. He's just someone that I think he's fantastic in everything I see him do, and he's just so natural. So I really like him. If I were to go, you know, a little further back, I'm trying to think. And actually, if I were to say an actress I've always admired, would probably be Kate Blanchett. She's someone that just, again, is just amazing in everything I see her do. So natural and just really taps into a character so organically. It's really impressive.
So if you were an actor right now, what do you think you would have been doing?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Because it's one of those things where I've said I wanted to do it for so long. It's weird thinking about doing anything else. But if I had to choose, I've always been fascinated by psychology, the human mind, which I guess probably plays into, you know, being an actor. You know, learning about like how humans work. So I mean, I think there's something about being a psychologist that I would be fascinated in maybe in pursuing more.
Do you have like a dream role you want to play someday?
Something I've always been fascinated by, and something I would love to do is I would love to do a multicam sitcom. I feel like we don't see as much of them anymore, and having grown up doing theater, I feel like it is probably one of the closest to theater we get because we do perform, because it is performing in front of a live audience. There's a show basically, and I grew up with a lot of big multicams like Friends and Will and Grace and Third Rock from the Sun, and I think it would be really cool to be able to do one.
Yeah, which one was your favorite?
Oh, I was a Friends junkie.
Yeah.
Huge Friends fan.
That's awesome. Who was your favorite character? Favorite character on Friends?
Oh, Chandler.
Oh.
I love Chandler.
Awesome. Yeah.
He's the man.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier a question I wrote down for you was like, if you could star alongside somebody, TV or movie, who would it be?
That's a great question. Let's see. Because as I said, definitely my grandfather. I'd love to work with him. But if there's another actor I would love to work with, I would love to work with Robert Downey Jr.
That's awesome.
He just seems like such a fun guy to work with, you know. just even, if I were to watch some like behind the scenes footage from like any of like the Marvel stuff or when he did Sherlock Holmes and stuff, he just seems like so down to earth and
Like
so
very mellow,
easy to talk to. Very mellow, yeah. He just seems like he'd be a really fun guy to work with on the set.
Mm. So like on your downtime when you're not working, what do you enjoy doing?
I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I try to always have a book that I'm currently reading, and I usually, if I'm not too busy, I try to set it some time every day to read, but that's obviously not always possible. And I also I watch a lot of television. I always try to stay up on what's like popular on TV, but it's kind of gotten to the point where there's so many shows, it's like so hard to keep up. I feel like every time I try to keep up on like, okay, what's popular now? There's like, I hear about new really popular shows coming in. I'm like, it's too much. And I also, but to like, if I were to like get out of my apartment and like go out, I really got into hikes. I love hiking. That's kind of where my like Zen relaxation place is. It's a good hike.
So you mentioned like you're a TV junkie and everything. Like, now we're in the whole, pretty much everything is streaming these days. What's your favorite streaming platform? Yeah. What's your favorite streaming platform?
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting because we're getting into that whole, like, there's that like streaming wars thing going on between all the streaming companies. I mean, I've had Netflix for longer, so I'd probably that, because for me, that's had the most content that I've watched. Yeah. But I have really gotten into Disney Plus because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've enjoyed the Marvel products, and obviously I grew up on all like the classic animated Disney and Pixar. So when that first came out, for the first 2 weeks, me and my girlfriend basically just like did nothing but watch Pixar and old Disney, because we just couldn't believe it. We could watch it in our home again. It was really nice. But yeah.
That's awesome. Scott, how can the listeners find you on social media?
Yes, well, I'm on Instagram. That's probably the platform I'm on the most, and really the main one I use. You can find me at Scott Alda Coffey. And I also have a website, which is www.scottaldacoffey.com.
All right, Scott, this was fun. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, everybody. That's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Man Cave Chronicles podcast.
I finally get my man cave.
You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the MCC Podcast, and our website, themccpodcast.com. Until next time.